Welcome everybody. Thanks for joining in. To the folks who are attending, I wanted to give a quick introduction to Piyush Gupta. Piyush Gupta is a serial entrepreneur. The first company was Promedia, which was sold to Ariba, and post that he started Exeros, which got sold to IBM. And right now, Piyush is actively advising startups and funds. Piyush is a great mentor and a friend for Arka. He advises quite a few of our portfolio companies as well. So welcome Piyush for the Fireside chat. Wanted to ask basically to start off with Promedia. So can you tell about Promedia and I think it was an offshoot of Liquid Price, which was a reverse auctioning engine. So can you tell about that journey and how it got acquired by Ariba?
Yeah. So actually the story starts before Promedia. That was my first gig, and till date I say that was my biggest idea, but it's one that got away. So the company started in 1999. I started it as Liquid Price. And it was a B2C, by the way. I mean, I'm an enterprise guy. The only C I've known in my life is that I go grocery shopping. But that was a B2C gig, and it was a reverse auction of branded goods. So you want a, TV, Sony TV, you want kitchen appliances, you want watches, those kinds of cars. The intuition at the time was, I said, why the hell do we have to run around looking for a deal? With the web, why can't the deal find me, right? So it was a reverse auction. You come to the site, you select what you want, and you say you want to buy this, and then the dealers bid against each other. So the price would drop effectively. So that's what the concept was. I remember that was the time. So it was an exchange. It was an exchange for standard goods. And at the time, Gartner was saying, but they felt there would be 650 exchanges running worldwide where transactions would occur. And we were very, very early. And that proved to be our undoing because, and that was also a time of hype. Remember, the web was just coming on in 1999. So raised a ton of money. Unfortunately, it was my first gig. My VCs were the first timers. And it was either burn bright or die. So we spent the damn money, it was either become a shining star or die. So we shone for a little bit. But then we started running out of money and things weren't taking off. I hadn't perfected the model. And before perfecting the model, if you just extend yourself, we were doing cars in like 20 states in the US, right? I mean, the former general manager of Nissan and Infiniti North America was working for us, trying to open the car market. The former Gillette general manager from Europe was working for us. So I got into trouble. And what had started happening even before we got into trouble was people asked us saying, look, we know you're doing an exchange for consumer goods. We'd like to do an exchange for the construction industry. Can you give us your software? The software wasn't there, and we had developed great software. I mean, so we developed a great platform, and we said, heck, why not? We're not 20-year-olds, so we can do two things at one time. So I actually had two efforts going on, one to do our B2C business, and the other to commercialize the software. And that was the biggest mistake I made, because once we got into trouble, the VCs panicked and said, hey, you got to put all your wood against the software business. That software business is what became Promedia. We renamed the company, got out of Liquid Price. The VC stopped funding us. 10 of us worked for 18 months without pay, which is the proudest thing I am in my career, right? All kinds of things you can say, but what you are is really found out if you get a team of people who'll work without pay for not 1 or 2 months, 18 months. And that then got exited into Ariba, of course. In fact, their product, I think it's Ariba Exchange, maybe. That product is still Liquid Price, is still Promedia, basically.
How much was the funding that you had raised for that company?
I think we raised $16 million for that.
Wow. That's a lot of money.
At least 16. I think it was, 16 was just cash. And then, as you guys know, you can get equipment and debt and all those kinds of things. So roughly, I say for each gig, I raised 25 million bucks, 25 for the first one, 25 for the second one.
Exeros, how did Exeros get started? And is it just after Promedia you started Exeros, or you waited for?
So once Promedia exited, by now I knew. So one of the things, as you guys all know who've done, startups, once you do a startup, you're impaired for life, right? In other words, you can't go back easily and work at a large company. You just can't, right? I mean, I was very glad to have worked at IBM early in my career. I think I was there 10 years. Work at a large company, figure out how things are done, figure out at least one right way of doing things. But then, going back to a large company was very hard. So it was very clear to me that I'm going to go do another gig. But I didn't have any ideas. So what I did was I said, okay, I'm going to go work help a lot of small companies. I had a lot of venture contacts by then, having raised 16, 25 million bucks. I had gone and knocked on a lot of doors. Not all of them funded us, obviously, but they liked me and I had the relationships. So I went to the VCs and I said, look, do you have any portfolio companies that could do with some assistance, that I could help with? And sure. And so they would introduce me. And the one thing I did was I didn't ask for anything. So I didn't ask for stock. I didn't ask for money and nothing, right? I said, look, I don't want anything. And my rationale for that was, if I'm getting paid, then I am compromised in some sense, right? I have an incentive. My opinions can be shaped. And I didn't want to have anything to do with that. I said, look, I'm going to work with these guys free and then see what my opinion is worth, see who takes it, who doesn't take it. So I'll see who I want to spend time with. So I was working with about 8 or 10 companies, right? And I'd give them some advice and they'd take it or they'd argue or whatever. But, this was about 6 months or a year after. It took us 6 months or a year. One of them, and my co-founder, Alex Gorlick, he had great technology. And his VCs told me, Piyush, great technologist, great technology, but we don't know whether there's a business there. So I met with Alex and I'd give him, we'd meet frequently and I'd tell him, give him some input. And he would ping me back saying, I did that and I've implemented this and now what should I do? So it was great. I mean, obviously he felt my ego was stroked. Obviously what I was telling him, he thought was interesting. But in about 6 months of working with him, I said, oh my God, we're sitting on a pot of gold. Here is the business. And that's when Alex said, hey, you want to come join? You can be the founding CEO. So that's how I went and joined Exeros. And I said, let's go raise money. Then we raised the Series A, we raised the Series B, and the rest is the Exeros story. But it wasn't my idea. It was Alex's idea. I helped shape it to make it a business from a technology. Then I helped raise the funds, and then we built the company, and we were flying quite high. And which to a lot of people here, as they hear somebody like me talk, it's not so much the success that they should look for. Because what succeeded for me may not necessarily succeed for someone else. But what was a failure for me is what they should pay close attention to, because they want to avoid those. Everybody will be faced with those, and you can avoid those. You may not be able to emulate somebody's success, but you certainly should hear people's failure and try to avoid those. And I had several of those, including at Exeros.
So I think that's a great point that you have raised. So can you talk a little bit about what Exeros was doing and what are the learnings from the failures that you got? I think that would be it will be quite enlightening for all of us.
Okay. Actually, let me talk about both the startups. And I'll tell you, as a CEO of a company, you can recover from any failure, any issue. There is only one issue that you cannot recover from, and that is running out of money. Okay, which is what happened to me at Liquid Price. At the first one, that was the biggest failure, right? If I had not spent the money the way I spent it, even though my VCs were saying, go ahead and spend it, but I should have not, right? I should not have expanded into so many markets when the model wasn't yet worked out. And eventually, what happened? I ran out of money, right? And if you look at our competitors at the time, Priceline is a name everybody knows. Priceline was competing against me, and I used to just poo-poo Priceline, right? I'm like, what the hell is this business model, right? I mean, I would give the example saying, look, when you go to a grocery store, at the front of the grocery store, there are fresh bananas, right? And they're whatever price they are. And then you go to the back of the store, and those bananas which have black spots, are reduced in price. It's for quick resale, and there's a low price. Well, I would say on on Liquid Price website, you can get the fresh bananas for a competitive price. Whereas at Priceline, especially in those days, and for flights, it's still true at Priceline, right? You're not going to get the premium flight. You won't get the nonstop from New York to San Francisco. You'll get one that'll go from New York to Chicago to where, and they won't tell you. So my point is, they had rotten inventory that they were selling where we had prime inventory. But guess what? And it's a fact that Priceline didn't make a profit before they had burned through $1 billion. $1 billion before they made a profit. Whereas I ran out of steam at 16 million, right? If I had done it more carefully, if I had had the money, if I had, Liquid Price would have been huge. Amazon wasn't there, right? It would have been a way of doing business.
William Shatner, right? Captain Kirk.
But Captain Kirk was their advertiser.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And he took stock and did his advertising for free. Right? I mean, those are so anyway, with Liquid Price, I made the cardinal mistake of running out of money. Now let's get to Exeros, right? So we get to Exeros, and we were flying high, by the way. So so I went back to my roots. I said, enough of this B2C crap. It's too hard. I'm not a B2C guy. I'll go back to enterprise software. It was enterprise software, And in those days, if certainly the IBM guys should remember, IBM's motto or slogan for data was information at your fingertips. Does anybody remember that?
I do.
Yeah, information at your fingertips, remember? Yeah. And I used to laugh at them. I said, what the hell do you mean information? You don't have information. You have data at your fingertips. You don't have information. If you want information from data, come talk to me. That's the business Exeros is in. So Exeros could take data and extract information from it, take values. And as a simple example, if you have a source and a target, and the target is being generated from the source, then by analyzing the values, we could reverse engineer the relationship between these data sets. So the point is, I'm saying I can provide the information, you only have data, right? And there are lots of use cases, which, by the way, became another issue because we went after all the use cases, whereas we should have kind of concentrated on some before doing that. But in any case, we were doing well. We had 20 customers. I had my first $1 million customer. And I was from IBM. I knew all the IBM guys. We would encounter them on deals. I'm leading up to my second mistake, which nobody should make. And every now and then, and I wanted a partnership with IBM. I'm like, guys, you tell this information at your fingertips story, and you're lying. I can make it true. Let's partner, And IBM would say, we don't partner. We'll buy you. We buy, we don't partner. And you know what? My stupid response, by the way, with the full support of my VCs, because we were doing like this. We were going very well, and I was getting ready to do my Series C. I'm like, you don't have enough money to buy me. Can you imagine This puny little startup is telling IBM Corporation, you don't have enough money to buy me. And, that's a big mistake. When you're running a company, put your ego aside, no matter how well you're doing. If somebody wants to buy you, have a discussion with them. There's no harm in doing that. Find out what the value is, open the doors, get a valuation set, because guess what happened with us? We were flying high. I was getting ready to go do my Series C. And I don't know if you guys remember 2008, right? There was a recession in 2008.
Yeah.
Suddenly the market and financial services, we were the canary in the coal mine. We were the first to get hit, right? So here I am, I'm doubling revenues every year. And suddenly in 2008, I'm flat or going down. Now, you and Sanjay are both VCs. Tell me if you do Series C for a company that you see coming in saying, I want to step up in valuation, but my revenue is flat or going down, right? So the point is, it's much better if companies are bought, not sold, right? So when they were telling me, hey, we'd like to buy you, if I had at least engaged with them, then it would have been, them buying me. The discussion would have been somebody wanting to buy me. I got into trouble and then I had to sell because I knew I couldn't raise a Series C. There's no way. What am I going to do? So now when I initiate the discussions, then you guys know what happens. I mean, it's just like when you invest, right? If there's a hot company that you're chasing, you know what the valuation is going to be. Whereas if a company is chasing you, you know what the valuation is going to be, right? So that's a mistake. Always, doesn't matter what your VCs are saying. When things are good and if somebody wants to buy you, have the discussion. Just as the corollary to that is, when is the best time to raise money, right? And you guys know this, some of the people who are, dialed in may not, but the best time to raise money is when you don't need it, right? As soon as you raise a bloody round, go get your debt and all the rest of the stuff lined up, because you'll get the right deal because you don't need the money, right? If you raise money when you need it, well, that's tough. Those are some of it. Don't run out of money, and put your ego aside and have a discussion when somebody reaches out to you. It's better for a company to be bought than for a company to be sold.
How did the acquisition eventually happen?
We knew that we had to sell, right? And we had a little bit of runway, so it wasn't as if we had to sell tomorrow. So, and by the way, we knew the market, we knew the players. For that acquisition, I didn't have bankers, by the way, right? So for the IBM acquisition, I did not engage any bankers. I was the banker. I did all the reach out, all the outreach myself, because I knew all the players, right? Who's going to acquire us? It's going to be Microsoft, it's going to be Oracle, it's going to be SAP, it's going to be IBM, right? And then there are some smaller players. So we knew all of them.
So you used to reach out to the corporate venture arm of these large companies?
No, I used to go to the operations guys. So I'd go to the data person.
Okay.
So IBM, I went to the data person. We were progressing down. Microsoft was not interested. Oracle did a little bit of due diligence, and the person they put in charge of the due diligence. And now I'll talk from the acquirer's side, and I'll use my example. What I was in my 30s and what I was in my 40s onwards. Big difference in me, right? In my 30s, if you came and told me, and I was VP of engineering, right? I was engineering manager. If you came and told me and said, hey, why don't you outsource some of your development work, or look at acquiring something, it would be like my manliness was hurt, right? What are you talking about? I can build this myself. I am going to build this myself, right? So I would be a terrible guy to put in charge of evaluating a company for acquisition, because I wouldn't have an open mind, right? My mind would be, oh, we can do all this crap. I want to shut this thing off, right? In charge of evaluating us. The AC guy, by the way, I won't take names. But I looked at him and said, oh my God, this is Piyush from 15 years ago. Forget it. So we spent time with him. He looked at it, this, that, and then found some reasons why no. So it came down to a two-horse race, right? SAP and IBM. And we went down the path, and the one thing potentially a banker could have helped me with was with the process, how it would go. I had no knowledge of it. As I'm getting in, he says, the price that IBM is going to pay you, we don't think you'll be able to return your debt. I talked with IBM and I said, look, this is not going to fly, and they said, well, that's the way it is. This price, this just doesn't make sense. It's not going to. I said, well, this is what it is. I mean, everybody plays hardball, right? Look, there are others, you won't get it. So be it. So guess what? I got a term sheet from SAP. Now, by the way, every term sheet, as you know, has a no shop clause, right? So once I sign the term sheet, I can't show it to anybody else.
Right.
So I told IBM, I said, look, I signed the term sheet. Sorry. And then they realized, okay, this guy wasn't exactly kidding. He has another offer, this, that, blah, blah. And then they came back and they doubled their price. They went way beyond. And I said, look, I can't talk to you. I have a no shop. I can't talk to you. But, of course, I conveyed to them, like, if I get an unsolicited offer, which is better, I mean, has to be way better, right? If it's an unsolicited offer, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% better than what I have, then there's nothing, right? My board will say, forget it. You're already down the path. And SAP was a great fit for us as well, right? Look, I can't talk to you, but if you make me an unsolicited offer, which is far superior, then I have to take it to my board. It's my fiduciary responsibility to take it to my board, which is what happened. They came back, they made a much better offer. And of course, what's the first thing I did? I called SAP. Guess what? I have an unsolicited offer. Do you want to, change your offer? And they were livid. It's my fiduciary duty to take it to the board. And the board is saying, yes, that's a much better offer. So it's easy. Just match them. Match them and it's yours. Or SAP refused to play, and then we went with IBM. IBM descended on us with a due diligence force which had more people than I had employees in my company, which is another interesting story. Anyway, so yeah, that's how the IBM acquisition occurred.
Okay. So, and post, I think May 2009, you joined IBM for how many years, Piyush? 2 years, I guess.
4 long years.
Okay.
I was there till 2013.
Just to bring things to today, right? I mean, we're in a very different era where we're going to be digital for a while. Maybe 2 aspects it'll be great if you could talk about starting up today versus, let's say, 10 or 20 years ago. That's one. And secondly, I think it'll be great if you could also bring in sales and marketing today versus earlier, right? In the sense that, putting on both your hats. One is as a startup founder and the other is also as a serial entrepreneur and a corporate executive. You could just contrast the two, right? If, from the shoes of a founder to in the minds of a corporate executive, pitching to and being pitched, right? And in the light of today would be, great to hear.
Some things, Sanjay, I feel haven't changed. The names have changed. So here's what. So today, for instance, I'm told. So let's contrast with startups. It used to be that you could do a Series A based on a PowerPoint, right? You could go on a PowerPoint. Maybe you have a prototype. Maybe you have some customers you've talked to who'll say, look, if they build this thing, I'll buy it for this kind of stuff. And you could do a Series A.
Which year was this?
Today, I'm sorry?
Which year was this where you could raise?
Well, 1999,
that's right.
I did a Series A. And then 2004, I did a Series A.
Yeah. Actually, Piyush, something on a lighter note, because I was part of that .com boom and bust as well. I just finished from B school. And in 2000, I remember the rounds floating around exactly what he said, is that all you needed was, in 1999, all you needed was a PowerPoint and a dog. right?
Wow.
And then and a dog, right? A startup founder with a PowerPoint and a dog.
Dog and pony show dog. Yeah.
Dog and pony show. And then in 2000, they said that then the PowerPoint was optional. You just needed the dog.
Now, having said that, Sanjay,
Yeah.
they used to say, stand under a tree, shake it, and the money will fall, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No,
That was not my experience.
Sure.
That was not my experience. I had to shake a whole bunch of bloody trees before the money fell, right?
Yeah.
But yes, it is true that technology risk was taken by venture guys.
Yeah.
Right? Today, I'm told that they don't take technology risk. By the time you go for a Series A, you better have the technology implemented. You better have $1 million in revenue, 4 or 5 customers. So the technology risk better have been taken out, and you better be well on your way to product market fit.
Yeah.
So that's a change, of course, but it's the same. Why? Because now what we used to call Series A is now called seed. Right? We used to use a 2 to 3 million Series A round was a reasonable big round.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas today it's an $8 to $10 million round. But seed is 2 to 3 million, right? So the nomenclature is changed. What was called A is now called seed. What was called B is now called A.
Pre-A, pre-seed.
Yeah, exactly. So on and so forth. So, now I rose up the engineering ranks, right? Having said so, and for engineering guys, we always think the product is the biggest thing, right? Oh, technology. And you have to go through and look at other things and manage other things when you realize, if today, if you were to ask me, and I don't think that has changed, Sanjay, that's the same. It's just that technology founders have to learn that. If you were to talk to me and say, look, here are choices you have. Here's a top-notch engineering team, and here's a top-notch sales and marketing team. You can pick one. The other one you got to build. Pick one. Guess which one I would pick?
Sales and marketing.
Sales and marketing. Because, look at who's running this country. You have sales and marketing. Doesn't matter what the bloody product is. You get the product made, So the importance of sales and marketing for technology founders, they have to learn it, and that hasn't changed. You might have the best bloody product. If you can't explain it, if you can't get it across to customers, if you can't sell it, it's a failure.
Now
you might have a lousy product.
Yeah.
But you have good sales and marketing.
Sorry to interrupt. I just want to interject. If you add in the cross-border element, that makes it even more complex, right? Because you're literally talking about selling across the bridge then. And you've got fantastic entrepreneurs like Aditya at First Time and the others here. If you just bring in that cross-border element and in the situation, how does that change or get amplified? So you're talking about a great team building great product, let's say in Bangalore, right?
Yeah.
And many of our companies and fellow VCs like Nexus also, almost all the companies, the back, and let's say founders sitting there. How does that change now in today's scenario, with this dynamic?
Not easily. Right? Because, when you look at it from India, and you look at it, enterprise software companies out of India that has done worldwide well, even today, there aren't that many examples, right? Because India is good at product development. They can build it, because now, by the way, maybe this COVID stuff will change things, right? The best thing that could happen to India, and I'm not being facetious here, I'm totally aware of the tremendous costs. But if COVID hung around for 5 years, that would be a wonderful thing. That would be a leveling of the playing field. How? Because guess what? For 5 years, business is not going to wait. Business is normally done face to face, right? Enterprise software, they want to look the CEO in the eye, right? And that's a disadvantage to Indian companies because they don't know how business is done here, right? They're learning, right? But how many youngsters will still refer to you as sir? That's not how business is done in this country, right? You don't and the reason I'm saying if COVID hung around for 5 years and companies got used to deals being done by Zoom and by phone, that would be a great equalizer for India because I'm sure there is good technology. right?
Yeah. How a large on that note, if you look at Armonk and you look at IBM and let's say SAP,
Yeah.
how culturally how are those large companies changing in terms of how they're buying and interacting with vendors and startups, right? In this slide, I mean, many of them have gone on work from home till the end of the year. Their buying and the procurement process, is that going through a change, or is it a bit of more of the same or a bit of both?
You know, so far, I'm told that these large companies, with respect to selling and buying, they are able to do their deals on the phone and on Zoom, and which surprised me. Very, some of the people I know at IBM, for instance, they are already sitting where they've achieved their quota for the year. I'm like, wait a minute, this is June. You've achieved your quota for the year? How the hell did you do this? By phone? Yeah, right. But I don't know if, Sanjay, if that's something that's going to last.
Right.
Don't know if it's going to last, unless, of course, unless the economies are shut down for 5 years, then this will become the new way of doing business, right? And even work from home and all. See, IBM company, for instance, people-oriented company, right? And there is something to be said about learning from others, right? When I was there at IBM in the second stint, we were going through a stage of, because we had gone through the stage where development was distributed all over the bloody world, right? There was piece of one project was sitting in Israel, another was
Right.
in India, this, that, blah, blah. And they were going, wait a minute, we have distributed it too much. We need to bring it together because there are some synergies, at least in engineering, you know, and engineering, market, product development, product management. There are synergies in people being together.
Yeah.
So they were done with the distribution. They were trying to bring it together so people are in the same place. And now suddenly it's work from home.
Sure, sure. Radhesh,
Right.
Radhesh, one more question, then I'll turn it back to you, and then maybe we can open it up.
Yeah.
Piyush, if you were, if you were like a cross-border entrepreneur, and one dynamic that I've seen is that it's a fat pipeline, right? There's all of us are sitting in our living rooms on Zoom, so people are readier to give time. So the pipeline of potential conversations is, fatter, but the time to closure is longer, right? And even on the investment pipeline, we are much more open to investments, but we are taking our time to make decisions, right? Because it's an investor's market today. I'd say it's a customer's market today. It's an enterprise market. With that dynamic, what are 2-3 takeaways that you would suggest to some of the founders that are based in the valley, the backends, let's say, are in Bangalore, in terms of sales closures, right? If they were looking at, they've got a great active pipeline, but that time to closure is taking longer. How do you accelerate that?
But first, let me put a caveat to what you said. There are some businesses where COVID has been great. I sit on the board of one such company. It's a telemedicine, telehealth kind of company, which has relevance in person as well. Well, guess what? Stuff is accelerated for them.
That's right.
Right? Because people need it, and people need it today. I mean, I suspect if you were a startup building PPE, your business would accelerate.
Yeah.
So there's some set of businesses for whom this has been great. But let's leave those aside. Let's take the nice to have businesses.
Right.
So go back to the first mistake I made is what I'll say first, which is conserve. Don't spend. See, normally what you have to do, you have to spend ahead of the sales. Right? That's what you normally do. You have to spend ahead of your sales because you got to put a sales team in, you got to put the SE in, you got to, beat the bushes, you got to manage it through the pipeline. You got to invest people today, and then you got to predict, saying, forecast, I'll do this in the next, and you got to hire because, it takes 6 to 12 months for them to produce. Well, you got to change that. Today's world, you got to hire after the fact, not before. Make sure your current, so make sure it's hard to raise cash in this environment. You got to conserve your cash. So you got to go from hiring to forecast to hiring to sales. That's the first thing you got to do.
Yeah.
And with respect to, whatever it is that you were doing, you could get away with seat of the pants. before. You can't today. You got to rigorously manage your funnel. You got to, as you're saying, people are willing to give you time, which means you'll waste a lot of time. You got to be even more rigorous on, look, here's the criteria by which I'll move down the funnel. If somebody is not satisfying those criteria, I'm going to, not talk to them. I'm going to find out in my first call whether this is a need, whether they have budget, so on and so forth. You could afford to be less rigorous when you were doing in-person things. You can't afford to do that here. You have to be more rigorous.
Well, very happy. Thank you, Piyush. Radhesh, back to you.
Thanks, Sanjay. Maybe we can open up for a couple of questions. We almost run out of time. So any questions, feel free to put it on the chat. We can take up.
I think let's, if I can, Aditya, if you're okay putting your camera on, or either way, Varun, if you have any thoughts to share, you shall know Aditya of First Hive, one of our Arka portfolio companies. Aditya, any maybe a question or anything you'd like to share around this?
What is Aditya's last name?
Hey, Piyush, Aditya Bamidipati.
Okay, of course.
Hi, how are you doing? It's been quite some time since we last spoke. It's
hey, guy, I'm 5 feet 6 inches above the ground. It's a great day.
Yes, it's wonderful to hear. Thank you for some incredible nuggets today, and resonates with everything that you've shared with me in the past when we met a couple of times as well. Piyush, just one kind of follow-on question on that sales and marketing thing. I think it's very interesting that you're saying that the fact that potential prospects are willing to give time is actually it's actually a paradoxical thing from a sales standpoint right now, because we got to be extra careful, right? Now, from an investment standpoint, from a sales effort standpoint, we are now basically, so we've taken one decision that we took about 3 months back, is to try and shift more focus into inbound rather than doing the outbound effort that we were doing. And this was one decision that we took to try and see if we can filter out more leads before they come to us. Is there anything from a sales motion standpoint that we should kind of incorporate in these times? Because little context on that, I think we are seeing some positive headwinds because we are in the digital transformation space, and therefore we've seen some deal closures as well in the last 60-70 days, even with the current situation.
Mm-hmm. But are the deal closures more or less than what you would have expected without this current situation?
I think we saw more closures. Some of the companies which were already in the pipeline, we've seen faster closures. But the new funnel that's coming in is moving slower through the pipeline. Yeah.
And when you say you're focusing inbound versus outbound, where are these leads coming from? What does inbound mean?
Yeah, so what we basically, when I mean inbound, we basically switched over to doing more content push. We are putting more effort on our webinars, and we are doing a little more partner push, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So the way you are getting leads is what has changed a little bit. Instead of dialing for dollars cold, you're using some other things. Yeah, that's fine. So but Aditya, so the question here is how you're going to move things through the pipeline and how you're going to close them, right? That's what the deal is. How you are getting them inbound almost doesn't matter to me. That's just how you're filling the top of your funnel.
Right.
So, and I think now, unless of course, if your business you're seeing is a deluge to closure, then just go run. You don't need anything else then, right? But if that's not happening, then my caution to you is just you have to have more rigor there, because you'll find that things go on and on and on, and then they just drop off, right? And then you look and say, oh, wait a minute. Why did we spend so much time with this guy? We didn't even ask them if they have a budget. We didn't even ask them when they have to close, those.
Right.
So you just have to be much more rigorous on that and walk away from some of these deals.
Got it.
And that's still true, by the way, if you were meeting face to face. I'm just saying, you can, when you're doing face to face, the deal closure rate will actually be higher, so you can afford to be a little more lax in it. Right now, you can't.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the bank qualification is something that we've done always, and that is something that we continue to do. But just from an investment switch that we did from dialing out dollars to really inbound is something that we did.